Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Bailey, sitting in today for Justin Brady. And welcome to the Iowa Podcast. Today, in just a moment, I'll be speaking with Brian Gumm, the founder of Ross Street Roasting, a wonderful rural Iowa tradition. It's become now a national brand in the specialty coffee roasting business. And I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Iowa Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if I haven't met you yet, again, my name is Greg Bailey. I live here in the Des Moines area, have for about 9.5 years with my family. And I've had the distinct opportunity to grow a software company called Denim Social that I exited successfully in 2021. And earlier this year, in full disclosure and transparency, Brian Gumm invited me to become a co-owner and partner of his in Ross Street Roasting. And so I'm delighted to be a part of the team and working alongside Brian and our fabulous, wonderful roaster, Jenny. And we'll get into the story about Ross Street Roasting in just a minute. But first off, Brian, welcome to the Iowa Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
You bet. Well, let's just start at the beginning. Let's go back and rewind the clock a little bit, the calendar, and tell us a little bit about the origin story and the history of Ross Street Roasting, where you started the company, why you started the company, and a little bit about the early traction, or just from the business side, and what customers in the early days, what they said about Ross Street Roasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Ross Street Roasting began as a daydream in roughly, actually right about this time of year in 2013. So it's been almost exactly 10 years ago that I started roasting at my home as a hobby. And I had originally kind of stumbled upon this hobby by meeting some home roasters and commercial roasters during my time in graduate school, which was out on the East Coast. But at the time in 2013, I was living in Tama, Toledo, Iowa, which is my wife's hometown. And during grad school, I had gotten spoiled with really good fresh roasted coffee from this community that we lived in. And then we moved to rural Iowa, and there was no good coffee on the grocery store shelves where we were living. And I decided, this hobby sounded cool when I was in grad school, but I was in grad school, so I didn't need a hobby at the time. But being in this good coffee desert, I thought, I've got some time on my hands now, so I want to try this roasting thing. And originally started it with a popcorn popper that I purchased at the local department store for about $20,
Cool.
and bought some green unroasted coffee from a friend of mine. And he shipped it to me from Virginia, and I started roasting on that little popcorn popper, and did a couple pounds of coffee for friends and family that Christmas season, and fell in love with the craft immediately. Hobby roasted for a year and a half, and then in 2015 started the business entity that we now know as Ross Street Roasting.
And if the story goes, you actually moved from your kitchen or your home to the backyard garage on Ross Street, hence the name of the business.
Yep. So the brand and the name of the business is named after that street in Toledo, Iowa. And you are correct. I started roasting. The first place I roasted was in the basement of our house.
Yeah.
That was before I really knew that the roasting process produces smoke. And so when I was doing that in our basement, smoke rises. And so even though I was downstairs, my wife was immediately smelling smoke, and she's like, you have to go outside. So moved out to the garage on Ross Street in Toledo, and that's where I stood. for a year and a half before we became an actual business.
Yeah. And then the story goes that those early customers were friends and family, and that you were just providing some gifts or some handouts. And then eventually, I guess they wanted to buy it from you.
Yeah, exactly. I was using, as I said, like repurposed equipment that was not designed for coffee roasting, and
Hmm.
so I had no control over the roasting process itself, other than turning the popcorn popper on and off and watching what was happening inside. So those were the only controls I had. I did start with very high quality specialty coffee, unroasted green specialty coffee. So despite the lack of control over the roasting process, the quality of that coffee came out so good, and the freshness is part of that as well. That when I did give out those gifts that holiday season, the feedback I got from people was overwhelmingly positive. And so that kind of encouraged me to keep going, because I was thoroughly enjoying the process of learning how to roast, what the process entails, the craft, but then also learning so much new information about where coffee comes from, how it's grown, all the different elements that go into the quality of a coffee before it even shows up at the doorstep of a roaster to be roasted. I fell in love with all of that. And so that and the feedback that I was getting from those initial friends and family, it was really encouraging.
That's really, really cool to get that type of feedback and that type of validation, right? Of the early product and the early coffee beans. So fast forward now, and eventually then you moved out of that garage um, and into buying a commercial roaster, and also nowadays, fast forward all the way to current days, more recent years, an actual building in downtown Tama, Iowa,
Mhm.
where Ross Street Roasting Coffee is roasted.
Yep.
And so, talk a little bit about just that fast forward to where the business is today and how we go about selling coffee um, to not only Iowans, but also out of Iowa to nationwide.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I do have a background in working in various tech roles, including the e-commerce industry way back early in my career. And so when I started the business, being in a rural community, knowing that if I wanted to grow the business, I could never rely exclusively on local only customers. I started the business with an e-commerce store on day one. As soon as I was legally allowed to sell roasted coffee, I was selling it on the website, in addition to, some of the local connections that I had made when I was still in the garage. Um, and so the website, the online e-commerce aspect of Raw Street Roasting has been very important to us from day one. Um, and it really helped us grow more, rapidly than we would have otherwise been able to. And yeah, we did use a rented space in Montour, Iowa, which is even smaller than Tama Toledo, for about a year. And then in 2016, we moved into our own building just off of the main drag in Tama, and that's where we're still located. Um, the first thing we bought when we started the business was a commercial roaster. We've since upgraded that roasting machine once over the years. I think we've been on this new roaster for about 3 or 4 years. Um, and so we're still considered a small kind of like micro roaster, but we have increased our production capacity over the years, and have make good use of the relatively small physical space that we have in Tama. I mean, the building that we operate out of is just shy of 800 square feet,
Yeah,
and it's a rectangular building, single story. It used to be an old feed store. A feed milling operation used to operate out of there from the 50s until the 80s, I think, is when it stopped being that type of business. So we're in that old, ag building,
right,
um,
right.
and that's become part of our story too.
That is good. And in fact, one of the most popular blends, the medium roast blend coffee from Ross Street Roasting, is called Jack's Feed Store, hence
Yep.
the original name of the building and owner of the building.
Yeah.
Let's jump now to the Christmas and the holiday season that's in front of us now. When listeners listen to this episode, it's going to be Thanksgiving Day or thereabouts, and we're quickly going to be into December.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on what are Iowans interested in, and not just Iowans, but coffee drinkers and coffee lovers. What are we into these days, and what's kind of in vogue, or what's top of mind for coffee drinkers these days from the Ross Street Roasting perspective?
Yeah, certainly the holiday season is always our best season in terms of online sales. We get a nice little bump, right around this time, right around Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Small Business Saturday, like all of those things for this 3-4 day period, and the weekend coming up. And then folks are getting ready, of course, for the Christmas holiday as well. And so sales overall in general are very good around this time of year. The types of products that folks typically pick up from us around this time are our prepaid gift subscriptions that they buy for family members or for themselves. So we have like 3, 6, and 12-month options, I think, for people who can just buy as a gift a prepaid subscription for our coffee products. As gifts, those are always pretty popular. We also have small bag sizes that clock in at 5 ounces. And so that's what I kind of consider like our sample size. Those are also pretty popular. So if folks want to get like stocking stuffers, they'll pick up a flight of our blends or a flight of our single origin coffees. Those are pretty popular around this time. But our crown jewel for this time of year is our annual limited release of a product that we've called the Stumbling Monkey, which is a whiskey barrel aged Ethiopian coffee that we've done. I believe this is our 6th or 7th year.
Oh, wow.
And we do it once a year. We've settled into the time of year. We've settled into doing it this time of year kind of by accident. Barrel aged beers is what I like to get, where I like to get the barrel from. And so we start with a whiskey barrel that has had a spirit in it, but I have grown to enjoy getting those barrels from breweries that then put a beer in it before we get it. And so it kind of goes from spirit to beer to coffee. And the types of beers that go into barrel-aged beers tend to be the darker styles, stouts especially. And those are more popular in the fall and winter time. And so that's generally breweries are emptying out those barrels right around this time of year as they're starting to release their darker barrel-aged beers. And so
let's give a shout out.
It was an accident.
Let's give a shout out here because there's a great Iowa brewery that you got this wonderful oak barrel from, right? It started, I should point out this year that it started by aging a whiskey out of Kentucky, but then Big Grove Brewery here in Iowa, right? And where'd you go pick that? Iowa City, I assume, is where you picked that up?
Yeah, Big Grove has now multiple locations around the state of Iowa, but it is the Iowa City production facility that we've like physically go pick up the barrel from. And they've been great to work with. We have worked with other breweries in the also from Iowa in the past, but Big Grove is kind of like settled in to be our barrel source. And there are times it didn't work out this year, but last year when we did the Stumbling Monkey, we had a bourbon barrel from Cedar Ridge, which is located in Swisher, Iowa, that went to Big Grove that aged their Richard the Whale Imperial Russian Stout. And then when they emptied that out, we got our hands on it, put the Ethiopian coffee into it. So and it's happened a few years where it's like Iowa whiskey, Iowa brewery, Iowa coffee. It's not like that this year, but it's still awesome this year. But it's kind of a little extra special when we get Iowa.
The trifecta. Maybe we call it the Iowa trifecta.
The Iowa trifecta. Yeah, exactly.
That's good. So this year, the product is available right now. I know the Stumbling Monkey product, and it's very, very limited. Just a handful of bags of 12-ounce coffee left of Stumbling the Monkey,
Yep.
and so that unroasted Ethiopian coffee beans were aged in this barrel for 30 days.
Yep.
And so anyway, pre-sales have been extremely strong. We're excited about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about, you mentioned stocking stuffers just a moment ago and gifts, and I want to double down on this. And I know that the podcast listeners won't be able to see this, but I've got in my hands here this little 5-pack box of a brand new product coming very soon. In fact, launching later today on recording day here. This is called Ross Street Roasting Single Serve of our Dark Roast Bohemian Gothic. So talk us through a little bit about this brand new coffee product in the single serve space from Ross Street Roasting.
Yeah, so we'll start with the coffee product itself, Bohemian Gothic. It's our dark roast blend. It's next to Jack's Feed Store. It's our oldest blend product. So we started with Jack's Feed Store medium roast blend. Bohemian Gothic became our standard dark roast blend. Easily one of our top sellers. Those two are top two consistently. And so we took our top selling coffee that we thought would make the best fit for a single serve option. And we partnered with a third-party manufacturer called Steeped Coffee, and they have a proprietary process, and they work with licensed roasting partners where we send them a bunch of our coffee, and then they run it through a process to get the roasted coffee ground down and packaged into single serve pouches that look like tea bags, that then get sealed, nitrogen sealed into outer packaging, and they stay fresh for a very long time. And so you can open up one of these single serve packs, pull out the little steeping bag, and fill a mug up with hot water, put that in there, let it sit for 5 minutes, and you've got a cup of Bohemian Gothic that tastes very, very close and true to the original. And the shelf life of that is very long. So it's great. It's a great option for single serve on the go, whether it's like throw it in a travel mug as you're heading out the door, throw them in a backpack if you're going camping, stuff a bunch of them in stockings for gifts at Christmas time for sure. So yeah, we're really excited for that product to launch. It's our first single serve option, period. It's also kind of the first type of coffee product we've evolved from our traditional base. So we've been in business for 8 years. This is the first time we're launching a new type of coffee product in that 8 years. So really excited about that as well. Yeah.
And the crowd goes crazy with applause. Absolutely. So excited about RSR single serve, our dark roast Bohemian Gothic. And I can tell you that I'm already thinking about all of my family and my friends that I want to give a nice little small gift to this holiday season coming up. And and again, we're going to sell these in 5-packs, right? So you get 5 little single serve coffee packs in a box. And so available when you hear this podcast, they'll be available at rossstreetroasting.com. And so that's the e-commerce site. And Brian, I know that we've got a little special treat just for Iowa podcast listeners. So let's kind of roll that out now. When you go to rossstreetroasting.com and you make a purchase, when you get to the checkout cart, type in Iowa Podcast, all one word, Iowa Podcast. And just for these listeners of Iowa Podcast, there's 10% off of your first purchase of any of our coffee products, including this new single serve 5-pack that you'll see on the site as well. So we know you're going to love that in this kind of in this environment that we live in of convenience, and we're on the go all the time. It seems like, especially during the holiday season that's coming around the corner here. I just think, and I know of myself, I'm going to be traveling to Missouri a lot to see family. They're not as into specialty coffee as I might be, but now I can take my specialty coffee and specifically this RSR single serve packs along with me, and certainly spread the joy of RSR coffee with those in Missouri and my family as well. So that's going to be exciting as gifts.
Absolutely.
So, any final comments that you want to make and just wrap up where you think we're headed as we look forward into the new year and beyond?
Yeah. Well, Greg, as you mentioned at the top of the episode, you have recently come into the Raw Street Roasting ownership family,
Yep.
and so in your capacity, you'll be working with me on growing the business through marketing initiatives, since that's kind of like in your
Mm-hmm.
toolbox. And so that's really the plan for the business is to just grow it. I've slowly been kind of like getting myself further and further removed from the nitty gritty day to day operations of the business, and started working on the growth plan. Um, it's the whole classic work on the business rather than work in the business. And
Right.
so you also mentioned our amazing roaster and operations manager, Jenny Rosario. She's been in that position for about a year and a half and has been doing a marvelous job. And that has allowed me to kind of
Absolutely.
like detach myself from that really nitty gritty operational stuff and work on growth. So we'll be working on growing our online sales channel, but we're also experiencing some growth in our commercial or wholesale channels lately that are great too, because not only do we serve home coffee drinkers, we also serve commercial accounts like coffee shops, grocery stores, restaurants, stuff
And
like
I
that.
and you know me, Brian, I have to name drop. It's like part of the obligation that I have, I think. But wonderful businesses and partners and collaborators that we have around the state of Iowa. So let's just talk out loud for a minute about Gravitate Co-working.
Hmm.
Has been a wonderful customer and partner of ours for some time. And then if you think about like restaurants and cafes and coffee shops like Brewhemia in Cedar Rapids, I know, and I'll probably leave some out, so fill in the blanks here. But Grinnell College, I know,
Yeah.
has been working with us for a period of time. Who am I leaving out on that list?
Those are some great ones, and I mean, special shout out for Bohemia, especially. Like they helped us name Bohemian Gothic.
Yeah,
Um,
the dark roast.
Bohemia is located in the new Bohemia neighborhood, which has a strong Czech heritage, and so does our part of Tama County also has a strong Czech heritage. And so when we came up with that name for our dark roast blend, Bohemian Gothic, that was actually one of the co-owners of Bohemia's original idea. Um,
Very
uh,
cool.
yeah, so really, really love them especially. But yeah, let's see if I can think of
Oh,
any
let's
others
think
off the
of
top of my head.
Hamburg Inn number two has recently
That's
come online.
that's our new one. Yeah. So Hamburg 2, a awesome neighborhood diner in on the north side of downtown Iowa City.
Hmm.
Uh, an historic diner, cafe diner, just came under new ownership, and the new owners have a put an emphasis on local sourcing, and
Hmm.
so they found us through searching for Iowa coffee roasters, and they came to us, and we sent them some samples. And I was just there for an Iowa Hawkeye football game 2 weekends ago, and had breakfast at the Hamburg Inn, and was drinking Bohemian Gothic.
How
So,
cool!
and it
How
was
cool! And we can't leave
breakfast
out.
was fantastic.
We mentioned just a moment ago, but Cedar Ridge has been a great partner and customer as well for some time.
Yeah, they used our coffee in their food service operation. Their Sunday brunch, where Raw Street Coffee is served, is phenomenal. So if you've never been to Cedar Ridge, it's worth the trip, not only for their excellent spirits, but also for their Sunday brunch. It's great.
Awesome, Brian. Let's wrap up today, and thank you so much for being on the Iowa podcast. How can folks find Raw Street Roasting? Obviously, I mentioned rawstreetroasting.com, but maybe you could give a shout out for maybe the Instagram handle or where else folks might find more.
Yeah, absolutely. On social media, we're somewhat active on Instagram and Facebook. The
Mhm.
Instagram handle is Roasted on Ross. Our website is rossstreetroasting.com. We also have a short URL, ross.st.
Okay.
And Google also works pretty well
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
finding us. And yeah,
And just a reminder again that type in Iowa Podcast as a promo code when you go online and get 10% off for those folks who are listening to this episode. And thanks again, Brian. Happy holidays to you and yours. And today, I just want to thank everyone who has been listening to the Iowa Podcast. I just might give a quick shout out that, again, I'm Greg Bailey, filling in for my good friend and longtime friend, Justin Brady. And you can learn more about all that I've got going on, not only with Ross Street Roasting, but another business that I created about 2 years ago called Propel Day. And that website is propelday.com, or on Instagram at Propel Day, PROPELDAY. Again, thanks again, Brian, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.